Where is it? Tell me now or you won't like what happens next.
I swear I don't know. Please, I didn't see anything.
They think they've covered their tracks, but the truth is starting to unravel. And when it does, no one is safe.
You understand what happens if you betray me. Look at me.
The view is incredible.
Almost as incredible as you look tonight.
What's going on?
The lights went out.
Somebody help us, please. Let go of me.
Please.
Keep moving now. Shut up!
How could you sit there and lie to my face like that? I know exactly what you did.
She said 4 words. And the most feared man in the city shattered a glass with his bare hand. Not because he was angry, because he was terrified. Elena had worked in the Moretti mansion for almost 2 years, and in that time she had learned one thing above everything else. Vittorio Moretti did not feel things. He decided things. He controlled things. He ended things. Emotion was for other people. Smaller people, softer people, people who hadn't spent 20 years building an empire out of silence and consequence. So when the glass cracked in his grip at 7:43 on a Thursday evening, every guard in that dining hall felt their blood run cold. Because it meant something impossible was happening. Vittorio Moretti was feeling something. And it was because of her. "I have a date tonight," Elena had said, quietly, steadily, holding the silver tray with both hands because she somehow already knew she was going to need the support. The grandfather clock ticked. The fire crackled. And Vittorio, who had not looked directly at her in 3 weeks, who had barely acknowledged her beyond one-word answers, who ran this household like a machine runs itself, cold and efficient and impersonal, looked up. He looked directly at her. The air in the room changed. The 2 bodyguards near the door found something very important to study on the far wall. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because the look on Vittorio's face was not his normal look. His normal look was nothing. This was something. "A date," he repeated. 1 word. Flat. But flat the way a knife is flat before it turns. "Yes, sir." She kept her eyes on his face. "I'll be back by 11. I just wanted you to know in case." "Who is he?" She hesitated. That was the first mistake. Less than 3 seconds, a fraction of a pause, barely anything at all. But Vittorio Moretti had survived this business by reading exactly what people thought was unreadable. And the small flutter of hesitation on Elena's face told him everything he needed to know. She liked this man. This wasn't just dinner. Something dark moved behind his eyes like a storm arriving fast. He reached for his whiskey. The glass cracked. Clean fracture, base to rim, right in his hand. A thread of blood appeared on his palm and slid down toward his wrist. He didn't flinch. He didn't look at it. He was still looking at her. "What is his name?" "Adrian." Her voice was steady even though her heartbeat was not. "He works in finance. He is completely normal and, cancel it." She blinked. "I'm sorry?" Vittorio was already on his feet. Jacket, movement, controlled energy underneath the surface like voltage under glass. "I'm canceling my meeting tonight. You're not going." Elena set the silver tray down on the table. Carefully. Deliberately. Then she looked at him and said something that no one in this house had ever said to him before. You don't have that authority over my personal life. The room went so quiet you could hear the clock breathe. The guards became furniture. Vittorio stopped moving. He looked at her. And in the silence between them, something shifted. Not anger, not the cold fury she had expected, but something rawer and much more frightening. Something that looked, from the right angle, like pain. He turned toward the fireplace. His back to the room. His hand is still bleeding slowly from the fractured glass. Did he touch you? He said very quietly. Elena stared at the back of his head. All the things she had not let herself think about rose to the surface at once. The white roses that appeared in her room every Sunday with no note. The driver who materialized every time she worked late, ready to take her home before she had even asked. Marco, the head footman, who had spoken to her with contempt in front of the whole staff on a Wednesday, and was gone from his position by Friday morning. The pattern she had spent 2 years telling herself was a coincidence. That, she said slowly, is none of your business. He said nothing for a long moment. Then, very quietly, like a man lowering a weapon he's been holding too long, go. Enjoy your evening. She went. She changed into the blue dress she had bought 2 months ago and worn nowhere. She did her lipstick with hands that would not stop shaking. She told herself all the way down in the elevator and out through the front door, that the feeling in her chest was relief. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea that 3 months earlier, a message had arrived at this house that had changed her life completely without her knowledge. The message had been delivered through intermediaries, because that was how messages moved in this world, and it had said simply, "We know about the girl." Vittorio had read it at breakfast on a Monday morning. He had read it twice. Then he had put it down, called his head of security, and had a 2-hour conversation at the end of which 3 additional men were assigned to a rotation that Elena would never be allowed to know existed. Because Riccardo Esposito, 9 years of grievance, infinite patience, eyes everywhere in this city, had discovered the thing that everyone in the Moretti household knew and no one ever said aloud. That Elena Vasquez was not like the other staff. Vittorio Moretti, who treated his household like a well-run machine, treated her differently. Not dramatically. Not obviously. Just enough. Just the roses, the driver, the precise and swift consequence when Marco had opened his mouth, that a man who was watching carefully enough could see it. The most efficient way to destroy Vittorio Moretti, Esposito had decided, was through the woman who cleaned his third-floor rooms and left thank-you notes in the kitchen and smiled at the household cat. He was not wrong. What he didn't calculate was what Vittorio would do about it. Upstairs, at the tall window of his private office, Vittorio watched the black car pull up at 7:45. He watched Adrian step out. Young. Easy smile. The casual confidence of a man who had never once had to calculate whether a restaurant was safe before booking it. He watched him walk around to Elena's side. He watched him open the door. He watched Elena smile. That smile. He had seen it 100 times in 2 years, at the kitchen cat, at the younger staff, at the old groundskeeper who grew roses from seed each spring. He had told himself, every single time, that what it did to something behind his ribs was not relevant. He was a man who had made a discipline of not feeling things like this. He had very good reasons. He had buried people who mattered to him before. But he had watched her smile at another man just now, and something in his chest had cracked just like the glass. He stood at the window until the car turned out of the drive. Boss. The guard behind him cleared his throat with extreme caution. Should we follow them? 7 seconds of silence. Yes, Vittorio said. All 3 units. La Terrazza was everything a first date should be, candlelight, city views, a menu worth the occasion. Elena had not been somewhere like this in years. She sat across from Adrian and let herself, slowly and carefully, relax. He was charming. He was funny. He listened when she spoke, which was rarer than it should have been. He poured her wine without performing the pouring. She felt, for the first time in longer than she could name, like an ordinary woman living an ordinary life. You seem like part of you is still at work, Adrian said, smiling at her over his glass. Sorry? I am completely here. She smiled back. It's just been a strange evening. I've heard working for Vittorio Moretti can be intense. He said it the way you might say someone's commute is long. Light. Conversational. It's very professional, Elena said immediately. The lights went out. Total darkness. Complete and instant, like a fist closing around the room. Half a second of silence. Then a woman near the window screamed and the scream became contagious and the room exploded. Chairs scraping, glass breaking, bodies moving in every direction at once. Elena shoved back from the table and stood. A hand closed around her wrist. Not Adrian's hand. Iron grip. Practiced. The hand of someone who had done this before, who had planned this, who was doing a job and not panicking about it. She was pulled sideways with enough force that she stumbled, and in the darkness she could make out shapes, 2, 3, moving through the chaos like they were immune to it. She clawed at the hand with her free fingers and got nothing. She screamed for Adrian and heard his voice somewhere behind her, too far, getting farther. She was being pulled toward the kitchen corridor, toward an exit, away from every person in the room who might help her. Then a sound cut through everything. One gunshot. Close. The grip on her wrist released. 2 more shots in the space of 2 breaths. Something heavy hit the floor beside her. Then again. Then the room went into a different kind of silence. The silence of people who have just understood that what is happening is not a robbery. It is something precise. Something targeted. And they should not move. Emergency lighting came on. Thin strips of pale gold along the floor, just enough. She pressed herself against the wall and looked into the room. He was standing in the middle of it. Black suit. Gun at his side. 3 men down around him that had not been there 60 seconds ago. He was scanning the room, exit, window, kitchen corridor, the way you scan a space when you have been trained to clear it. Methodical. Calm. Completely in control. His eyes found her in 2 seconds. He crossed the room in 6 steps. Both hands came to her shoulders and the grip was tight. Not gentle, the grip of a man who has just run toward danger because of where the danger was, and has found what he came for. Are you hurt? She shook her head. Are you hurt? Same words. Different urgency underneath them. No. Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. No, I'm not. You followed me. Yes. You sent people to follow me. To my date. I placed security on your movements 3 months ago. Tonight the security intervened. He said it the way someone states a fact. Like he is reading aloud from a logistical report. 3 months, she stopped. Started again. Vittorio. Why? He looked at her. In the emergency lighting, with 3 unconscious men on the floor around him and the restaurant full of silent, staring witnesses, his face held the particular expression of a man standing at the edge of something he cannot take back. We are leaving now, he said. Tell me why. I will explain at the house. Tell me why you have been having me followed for 3 months. The restaurant was very quiet. Vittorio said, with the careful precision of someone disarming something dangerous. Because 6 weeks after you arrived in this house, I noticed that you left a thank you note for the kitchen staff every Friday. And I realized something I was not prepared to realize. And then I spent almost 2 years trying to pretend I had not realized it. She stared at him. From somewhere behind her, Adrian said her name, quiet and bewildered. Vittorio's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He looked at the point over her shoulder where Adrian stood and then he looked back at her and he said, We are leaving now. Please. Please. She had never heard him say that word before. She went. In the car, she sat close enough to feel the warmth of him through his jacket sleeve. Neither of them spoke. The city moved past the windows. The driver kept his eyes precisely on the road. She kept thinking about what he'd said. 6 weeks after she arrived. That was almost 2 full years ago. 2 years of white roses and drivers and consequences she hadn't connected, and all of it, every single careful, deniable act of it, traced back to a Friday 6 weeks in, when she had left a note in the kitchen. She had written, Thank you for keeping the coffee on late. Means a lot. Elena. 12 words. On a post-it note. And apparently it had changed everything. Back at the mansion in his private office, he finally told her the truth. All of it. Not piece by piece, not reluctantly, he told her the way a man tells the truth when he has run out of reasons to keep it hidden. Esposito identified you 3 months ago, he said. He stood by the window. He did not sit. Sitting would have been too comfortable for what he was saying. He sent a message. We know about the girl. By which he meant, he had observed something that I had not been careful enough to conceal. That I matter to you, Elena said from the chair across the room. He didn't answer. Vittorio. That is what he meant, isn't it? Yes. Quiet. Final. And so you put security on me? 3 teams. Rotating. You were never alone after that. He paused. You were not supposed to know. It was cleaner if you didn't know. If you knew, you might change your behavior. If your behavior changed, Esposito would notice, and then he would know that I knew, and then he'd know for certain how much I mattered. She finished the sentence. Yes. She looked at him standing at the window with his back half turned to her, still in the suit, still perfectly composed on the surface, and thought about everything the surface had been hiding. The whole architecture of quiet, careful devotion, built over nearly 2 years, never named, never acknowledged, protected by layers of plausible deniability. He came after me tonight, she said, because he decided to test whether you would show up. Yes. And you showed up. Yes. In person. With a gun. In the middle of a full restaurant. Pause. You know that is going to be everywhere tomorrow. Yes. Something moved across his face. I know. You didn't care. He turned from the window then. He looked at her across the room with the look he'd had in the restaurant, standing at the edge of something he cannot unsay, and this time he did not retreat from it. When I understood what was happening in that restaurant, he said slowly, the only thing I was thinking about was getting to you. Not the exposure. Not the cameras. Not Esposito or his men or what any of it meant for this organization. He stopped. Started again. I have been afraid twice in my adult life. The first was 3 months ago when I read his message. The second was tonight when I heard gunfire in a building where you were. She was very still. The most feared man in the city, she said quietly. Apparently that means very little when you have something to lose. She stood up from the chair. She walked across the room, past his desk, past the leather chairs, past the careful distance he had kept between them for 2 years, and she stopped directly in front of him. Close enough to see his eyes properly in the low light. Dark gray, she realized. Not black as she'd always thought. Dark gray with something underneath, something that had been suppressed for a very long time and was now, reluctantly and irrevocably, rising to the surface. The roses are from you, she said. He said nothing. He didn't have to. The driver on late nights. Marco disappeared after what he said to me. She held his gaze. All of it. All 2 years of it. Yes. Why didn't you just tell me? His jaw tightened. He looked at the space just past her shoulder, like the answer was written on the wall behind her and he was deciding whether to read it aloud. Because, he said finally, if I told you, I would have had to accept that it was real. And if I accepted it was real, then I would have to live with knowing that the most effective way to destroy me was standing 6 feet away from me every evening holding a silver tray. He exhaled slowly. I have buried people I cared about. I was not going to let that happen again. Elena looked at him for a long moment. So you protected me in secret, she said, to protect yourself from having to admit you were protecting me. He opened his mouth. He closed it. That, she said softly, is the most complicated and also the saddest thing I have ever heard. Something happened at the corner of his mouth. A movement. The first suggestion, in God knows how many years, that a smile was somewhere in the vicinity. I am aware, he said, that it is not a rational strategy. No, she agreed. It is not. She took the last step forward, closed the remaining distance between them, and looked up at him from a foot away. Close enough that she could see the faint mark on his palm where the glass had cut him. Close enough that whatever wall he had been maintaining for 2 years had simply run out of room. Vittorio, she said. No more pretending. Either of us. He raised his hand, slowly the way you move towards something you are afraid will disappear, and touched her face. His thumb just below her cheekbone. Barely anything at all. But she felt it everywhere. I don't know how to do this, he said. Oh, honest. Like a confession from a man who has not confessed to anything in 22 years. You have been doing it for almost 2 years, she said. In your own completely insane way. You already know how. He looked at her. And then he kissed her. Not the way fear and relief and 2 years of suppressed everything might have predicted. Not desperate. Not rushed. He kissed her the way he did everything, with complete intention, nothing wasted, nothing halfway. Like a decision that had been made before the moment arrived and was now simply being carried out. Elena kissed him back and felt, somewhere in the middle of it, the particular sensation of something shifting that had needed to shift for a very long time. Outside, one of the guards on the perimeter walked his route and carefully did not look at the office windows. Inside, the grandfather clock in the hall ticked on. The next 3 weeks were the quietest in the history of the Moretti household. Not because nothing happened, things happened constantly, the way things always happened in this world, late-night calls and cars arriving at strange hours and rooms that Elena did not enter. But inside the space where she and Vittorio now existed together, there was a stillness that felt deliberately built. Like he was constructing something the same way he built everything, carefully, one deliberate piece at a time, nothing left to chance. He started eating dinner with her. That alone nearly stopped the kitchen staff's hearts. The first time, he had simply looked up when she came to clear the table and said, as though it required no explanation, "You haven't eaten. Sit down." She sat. They didn't talk much that first night, He worked through documents, she ate, they occupied the same space in a new kind of quiet. But she noticed that the documents stayed on the table for an extra 40 minutes past when he would normally have retreated to his office. The second time he was already waiting when she arrived. The third time there was a second place setting already laid. Nobody in the household said anything about this. They simply noticed it, adjusted around it, and moved through it like water moving around a new stone in a river. A feature now, not an obstacle. He was trying. That was the thing about Vittorio Moretti that no one outside these walls would ever believe and that Elena understood better than anyone. Beneath the cold surface and the iron control and the 22 years of careful emotional deprivation, he was trying. He asked her questions. He listened to the answers with the same focus he brought to everything else. Complete, uninterrupted, like she was the most important briefing of his day. He told her things he had not said aloud in years. About this city, about his father, about what he had inherited and what it had cost. She told him about her mother's handwritten letters and her father pretending he hadn't cried at her graduation. He listened to these stories like they were precious objects, handling them carefully. "They don't know which family you work for," he said one evening. "They know I work for a wealthy family." She met his eyes. "Which is true. Your mother would be concerned. My mother would be extremely concerned." "Your mother," he said, with the ghost of dry humor she was learning to catch before it disappeared, "would have very good instincts." Elena laughed. Genuinely, suddenly, the kind of laugh that happens before you decide whether to have it. And the sound of it in that dining room, which had not held that sound in a very long time, made two guards outside the door stand a little straighter and then exchange a look they would never discuss. Esposito made one final move 3 weeks later. A man in a brown coat approached Elena at the neighborhood market on a Wednesday morning. Polite. Well-dressed. He said he was a journalist writing about the Moretti family's business interests and wondered if she might speak with him informally. Elena looked at him for exactly 4 seconds. Then she took out her phone and called Vittorio. "There is a man at the Frascati Street Market," she said when he answered. "Brown coat. Near the flowers. He says he's a journalist and wants to talk about your family." 3 seconds of silence. "Go into the cafe on the corner right now," Vittorio said. "Order something. Do not leave until one of my people comes." "Is he dangerous?" "Directly, probably not. He is reconnaissance. Esposito is testing whether he can still reach you." "A beat. Are you all right?" "I am completely fine. I'm going to get a pastry." "Good." And then lower, the particular compressed quality of his worry, the version she had learned to hear beneath the control. "I will see you at dinner." She went into the cafe. She got a coffee and a pastry and sat at the window table. 8 minutes later the man in the brown coat made a very sudden decision to be somewhere else. She watched him go and felt something she could not entirely name. Not fear, not exactly. More like the feeling of being inside something very large and very serious and choosing, with full awareness, to stay. That was the last move Esposito ever made toward her. She did not ask what happened to him after. She had learned the shape of this world well enough to understand that some questions had answers she did not need to hold. What she understood was that the threat was closed. Vittorio came to dinner one Tuesday in November with the quiet of a man whose attention is no longer divided, and she recognized the specific quality of his stillness, not tension but release. It was over. They were, as much as people in this world ever were, safe. On a Sunday in November she found the roses in her room as usual, fresh white, the same variety as the ones that grew on the south wall of the garden, and for the first time in 2 years she went directly downstairs and asked. She found him in the study. She said, "Why Sunday? The roses are always Sunday. Why that day specifically?" He set down the document he was holding. He looked at her. "You arrived here on a Sunday," he said. 2 years ago. You were in the garden with the groundskeeper, and you asked him about the roses on the south wall, and he told you the variety, and you said they smelled exactly like your grandmother's garden." She stared at him. "You were in this study," she said. "The window was open. You remember a conversation I had with the groundskeeper 2 years ago?" "I remember most things you do," he said steadily without apology. "I was not always comfortable with this. I am now less uncomfortable." She stood in the doorway of his study and looked at him for a long moment. This man. This impossible, controlled 2 years of secret roses, glass cracking, walked into a gunfight because she was their man. "You could have just talked to me," she said. "I am aware. At any point in 2 years. You could have just. I am aware, Elena. I might have said yes to dinner considerably earlier." Something happened in his expression. The almost smile fully arrived this time. It transformed his face the way sunrise transforms a landscape, Suddenly, and with more warmth than you remembered was possible. I am also aware of that, he said. She crossed the room, sat in the chair across from his desk, and looked at him the way she'd been looking at him for 2 years without admitting that's what she was doing. So, what happens now? Now, he said, we do this correctly? Without secrets? Without pretending? Can you do that? She said it gently. Genuinely. After 22 years of doing the other thing? He met her eyes. I intend to find out. The mansion that winter held more warmth than stone and old radiators could account for. The staff noticed it the way people notice a shift in weather, through small, accumulating signals that only made full sense in retrospect. The second place setting at the dinner table every evening. The way the boss paused in the middle of a phone call one afternoon when Elena passed the study door, his eyes tracking her movement before returning to his call. The Sunday roses that had always appeared and had always been anonymous, and were now simply understood for what they were. Nobody said anything about any of it. Some things don't require saying. The most feared man in the city sat at his dinner table on a Friday evening in December, eating food that was too good to rush, talking with the woman across from him about something small. A book she had read, something her mother had written in a letter, the name of the rose variety that bloomed on the south garden wall, and felt the weight of having something worth protecting. He had felt that weight before. He knew what it cost. He knew the specific mathematics of loving someone in a world built on leverage and consequence, knew it in his bones, in the memory of every loss that had made him who he was. But he also knew, sitting at this table this evening, that the weight had been there for 2 years already. It had been there since Friday evening when he sat in an empty dining room and found a post-it note in the kitchen the next morning that said thank you for keeping the coffee on and signed with her name. The weight had arrived then, uninvited and permanent, and all he had done by pretending otherwise was carry it alone. He was not carrying it alone anymore. Elena looked up from whatever she'd been saying and caught him watching her. She raised an eyebrow. You stopped listening. I was listening, he said. You were thinking about something else. I was thinking about the coffee note, he said. She blinked. The what? 2 years ago. The Friday thank you note you left in the kitchen. For the staff. 12 words. He held her gaze. That was the moment I understood I was in considerable trouble. She stared at him across the dinner table. Then she said, softly, with the smile he had been memorizing for 2 years without admitting it, Vittorio, you're an absolute disaster. Yes, he agreed. He reached across the table and took her hand. And the cold mafia boss who had not loved anyone in 22 years, who had built his entire world on the principle that caring for someone was the most efficient path to losing them, held on. She did not pull away. She looked down at his hand over hers, at the faint scar on his palm from the cracked glass, fully healed now, barely visible unless you knew where to look, and then she looked up at him. So what was it about the note specifically? She asked. 12 words. Why those 12 words? He considered this the way he considered everything. Carefully. Without rushing. Before you arrived, he said, no one in this house left notes. People did their jobs. They performed their function. They were compensated. That was the arrangement, and it worked, and no one expected anything beyond it. He paused. And then you left a note on a Friday evening thanking people who were simply doing what they were paid to do. For keeping the coffee on. As though it was a kindness extended personally to you. He looked at her. It was a 12-word reminder that I had stopped being able to see the people in this house as people. And you had been here 6 weeks and you still could. Elena was quiet for a moment. That's a lot to read into a post-it note, she said. Perhaps. He turned her hand over in his, not examining it, just holding it like he was learning the weight of something new. But I have found, in my experience, that the people who change things rarely announce themselves. They leave small evidence behind and you only understand what it meant later. She thought about the groundskeeper's roses on the south wall. The coffee note. The blue dress she'd bought 2 months ago for no reason she could name at the time. Small evidence. Only understood later. I should tell you something, she said. Yes. The roses. I knew they were from you. She met his eyes steadily. Not immediately. But by about month 3. I knew. He was very still. And you didn't say anything, he said. And I didn't say anything, she confirmed. Because if I said something you would have stopped. And she paused. Choose honesty. I didn't want you to stop. The silence between them was warm and full and completely different from every other silence this room had ever held. Elena, he said finally. Yes. We have both been extremely foolish for a very long time. She laughed, that real sudden laugh that she could feel him storing somewhere, and said, "Yes, we absolutely have." He did not let go of her hand. Outside, December settled into the old stones of the mansion. The garden was silver with frost. The city beyond the walls continued its loud, indifferent life. And at the table by the window, the most feared man in the city and the woman who had known about the roses for almost 2 years sat together in the kind of silence that is not empty at all. The grandfather clock in the hall counted the hour. Neither of them moved. Some things once held you do not put down again.